Today we're going to install PowerStop's Z36 Extreme front and rear kit, pads and rotors on this 2011 F-250 four-wheel drive. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, so I've already got the truck up in the air and secure with jack stands. I've also got the wheel off. Next, I'm going to use a 16 millimeter. I'm going to take the caliper loose from the caliper bracket, and I'm going to hang that out of the way. All right, now once we get the caliper free, very important, do not stress this brake line. What we're going to do is we're going to hang it on the coil spring, being very careful not to stress that line. All right, next we're going to go ahead and remove the caliper bracket, and we're going to use a 21 millimeter to do that. Got 2 bolts. Go ahead and pull the caliper bracket off. Next we can go ahead and pull the old brake pads out of the way. Now we want to meticulously clean where the brake pad hardware was. All right, so we got some new boots to put in here. Let me show you how to replace those. You just pop off the first one. Just break it loose from the peg. Slide the new boot in place. Make sure it goes all the way down and engages the lip. Once that's engaged, we can go ahead and put the peg back into place and make sure that the boot is all the way down over top of the lip at the base of the caliper bracket as well. Do that to all of your brackets. Okay, next I'm going to go ahead and pull off the factory rotor, put on my PowerStop rotor. Now once I get that PowerStop rotor on there, I like to take a nut and run it down one of the lugs just to hold that rotor in place, keeps it nice and flat and straight for the remainder of the install. Okay, so now this is our new bracket. Our old bracket actually had one of the pins completely seized up inside, so we went ahead and got a new caliper bracket and new pins. Next, what we're going to do is put a little bit of grease in these little areas right here. This is where the brake pads slide back and forth inside the caliper bracket. So make sure that's lubed up. You just want a nice thin layer of lubricant in each one of those on both sides. Next, we can go ahead and install our brake parts hardware onto our new brake pads, slide them into the caliper bracket, then we can reinstall the caliper bracket onto the truck. Next, what we're going to do is go ahead and compress our caliper. Now, if you've got a caliper tool, go ahead and use that. Otherwise, take a couple of your brake pads that are old, use those with a C-clamp, and you can compress it that way. Once that's done, we can go ahead and reinstall it back onto our caliper bracket and then tighten everything up to factory torque specs. Okay, now just like the front, this is going to be very similar. There are some subtle differences. Now, one thing that I have done is, of course, I've put it up in the air, put it on some jack stands, removed the wheel and tire. I've also pre-hit this with a little bit of penetrating oil. These are known to kind of sometimes want to freeze up a little bit and not break loose. So I got that started right around each one of the lugs. I shot a little bit of penetrating oil, and then also around where it meets the hub, I just used some penetrating oil. Next, what I'm going to do is take the caliper off of the caliper bracket, again using a 16 millimeter, and I'm going to tie it off to my leaf spring. Now, before I remove the caliper bracket, one thing I want to point out is the brake pads that we're going to put on there do not have a locating pin to show you exactly how that brake parts hardware goes on. So make sure you note the orientation of the brake parts hardware per the pad so they go on correctly and you get them in the right way. Now, just like on the front, we're going to go ahead and pull this off using a 21 millimeter. We're going to clean this up very meticulously, lube it up just like we did in the front, and we're also going to replace the boots just like we did in the front. All right, now we're going to go ahead and put on our rotor, slide that in place. We don't necessarily need any kind of lug nuts in here because we got the brake shoes that'll hold it nice and straight for us. Next, we're going to go ahead and reinstall our caliper bracket, reinstall our caliper after we've compressed that down. And then we're going to tighten everything up to factory specs. Well, we're going to repeat the exact same process on the opposite side, and that will conclude the installation. If you have any questions, call the experts or visit us online.